What do you think of when you hear the word consciousness? The first thing that comes to my mind is awareness. Those things which we are aware of, we are conscious of, and that is where we live and move and have our sevenfold being. This, of course, happens on a physical level with our physical brain, which is where we're going to be beginning today. But keep in mind that we also have our energetic body, our emotional and mental bodies, and then we get up into our higher self, which is the soul, and the individuation of God, which takes us into that far greater consciousness in connection with the divine. So what kind of consciousness do we want to have? What do we want to focus our awareness on? And if we're not there yet, what can we do to change or reprogram it? Well, as some of you may remember, I had the opportunity about a year and a half ago to attend a conference in New Mexico. That was before the pandemic. And I was really inspired by being with a large group of people who shared a common interest in the combination of science as well as the metaphysical or spiritual aspects. And this conference was called Scientists, Mystics, and Sages. Well, two of the speakers that I heard there, Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton, together with a woman named Lynn McTaggart, put together another course that they offered this year online since they couldn't do it in person. And this one was called Technology, Consciousness, and Evolution. And again, I was just very inspired by listening to what they had to say, and I was particularly struck by Greg Braden's presentation, and I'll be sharing some of that today. I've always loved life sciences, and one of my favorite classes in high school was human genetics. And I remember we learned all about the chromosomes and genes and the dominant and recessive ones. And this was back in 1980, and it seemed like, from what I can remember, that it was presented that some of our human traits, such as eye color or hair color, were kind of almost like simple combinations of genes. You could predict what the offspring would look like based on what the parents, what they looked like. Well, it was 20 years later, in the year 2000, that they published the results of the Human Genome Project. And you've probably heard of that, even if you're not really aware of all that they did. But they were able to map out all of the human chromosomes and to find all the different genes. And I think they were very surprised to find that humans did not have as many genes as they thought. They thought because we are so much more advanced than other life forms that we would certainly have a lot more genes. But as it turned out, we only have about 24,000 genes, whereas the field mouse has 25,000. And so they thought that was very odd. Well, of course, they also found out that, or they realized that we are self-regulating, which means that our bodies are able to turn on and off genes, and that one gene doesn't necessarily correspond with one thing. It can make up to 100 different genes. And so we suddenly have this wide variety of ways things can be expressed, which, of course, explains it biologically, and we know from a spiritual viewpoint that there are lots of different factors that come into play as to how our inheritance will be expressed. But they were saying it just helps us to realize we're not victims of our heredity. And just because we've been given something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be expressed.